In this episode of Costume as Character, I spoke with Sophie Durakoff and Beth Lancaster about their work on season 3 of The Morning Show. But before we get into that, if you want more Costume as Character videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. Season 3 sees Bradley Jackson promoted to the evening news, and she's really reached this milestone in her career where she's able to speak truth to power and tell the stories that she's always wanted to. That element of her as a journalist has been reflected in her wardrobe since the beginning. She's always dressed in really dark, earthy toned colors that ground her. They sort of make her seem very serious. She's in burgundies, she's in deep blues, in blacks. Those are somber, serious colors, and they fit the types of stories that she's trying to do. They match her personality as the truth teller. In a bit of season 3, we see her wardrobe begin to shift a little. There's a particular moment where she wears this ice blue dress with a blazer, and it's a gorgeous piece, but that color is very different to the colors she's been wearing before. It's still cool, which Sophie goes on to explain why she picked that tone, but it also really sets her apart in that moment from the Bradley that we've known up to this moment.
She has a signature palette, which we started with season 1, maintains all the way through the seasons, but this was a specific punctuation point where we wanted to light her up, but also keep her icy and still keep her in the cooler tones, because that is a reflection of who she is. But it's the thing about being performative. So she's getting an award, she's front and center in the camera, she's elevated, she's moved into an elevated sphere. So how to do that, but also separate her from the person that she was in the previous seasons. And yes, the palette was intentional with that.
Another key element of costuming morning, news anchors, and also as Bradley's on the evening news, is silhouettes, lines. You have to really pay attention to how you're costuming these characters, because they're sat down, they're at a desk, or do they do spots where they're standing up? Are they on location? And something that's really key in the way that those wardrobes are built are silhouettes. And there's a long history of the way female news anchors are dressed in very male silhouettes to give them that gravitas. Now, as time went on, that was able to shift a little, and female news anchors were able to dress with a little more femininity. We're using these kind of gendered terms. Unfortunately, we live in a world that still likes to use them, so we will. And it really reflects how things shift or don't in terms of the way women are represented on screen as anchors. And in season 3, Sophie was able to play a little bit more with those silhouettes because of the fact that Bradley had advanced further in her career. She's given the opportunity to play with those pieces to reflect the fact that she has ascended to this point.
When we meet her at the beginning of season 3, she's already elevated. Her character is already elevated. So, her anchor look has elevated, and it's become very specific. She works within 2 worlds. She works within the fitted trouser suit, the male, more of a male silhouette. And then she also has, a more feminine silhouette, which is the shorter skirts and the fitted jackets. And that's to express really the duality of her as a person, and also the duality of her politically, and her being able to speak to both sides of the country, which is such a pivotal point. Once she is being less performative and she is her own self and she's not in front of the camera, again, you can see her confidence reflected as the season continues. She's still the same Bradley in that it's jeans and it's sweaters and it's blazers, but they are more fitted, they're more intentional, it's more conscious. And so that's something I think that you if you are familiar with her and her character, you will spot, and you will be able to see it as you go through.
A new addition to season 3 is the character of Chris Hunter, played by Nicole Bahari. This was a really exciting character to watch. It was really fun to kind of watch her arc develop. But also, her costume design is so different to the anchors that we've seen previously on the literal morning show, not the morning show we're watching. And one of the things that I picked up on straight away, and I think a lot of viewers will as well, is her outfits had way more pattern, way more color. They were visually very interesting. They were a little more relaxed. And when I asked the designers, particularly Beth Lancaster, about creating that wardrobe, that came from not only the character herself, but also the needs of the color palette of the rest of the show.
I think the thing, what the opportunity that we had with Nicole was to go back to a more traditional, familiar morning anchor look for the morning news, where, you see color, you see the sheath dresses, you see the bare arms, which our other characters don't do because the characters don't do that. But, Chris Hunter's character coming in as someone who is still able to be, guided by the network, who doesn't have the power or the confidence yet professionally to wear the dark colors and wear the men's suiting. It was a really interesting opportunity to go back and be able to incorporate and revisit one of those characters. And we were able to balance it because the set of the set of the morning news has all that color in it. So it was between all of those elements, it was really great to be able to bring some color in.
She wound up in the sort of spectrum of colors that the other characters haven't wound up in. She's in your yellows, she's in your oranges, she's in your bright greens, which sort of fills in the color spectrum that our other ladies haven't really been in, which was great, so it all sort of comes around full circle.
You can really see the way color is indicative of power and status through Chris's character, because there's a moment where she has her journalistic moment where she really shines, and in that moment she is in this maroon dress suit and she looks stunning. But it's interesting to see that contrast to the outfits that she wears on the morning show as an anchor, and how differently they highlight what she's trying to accomplish.
And it's exactly that. It's her journalist moment.
Right.
It is. And that's the power of dressing, that's the messaging of dressing. So we wanted to do something a bit different on Nicole and bring in a bit of pattern, but we didn't want to do the traditional florals and things that you might see on a morning anchor. So what we really did to kind of try and bring in a bit of her sporting background is really go for a more geometric pattern. So you won't see her in a floral, you'll see her in perhaps a grid, you'll see her in a very geometric pattern, you'll see her in something, a stripe, you'll see a stripe, you'll see her in a lot more of those kind of deco patterns, So we really tried to stick with a very graphic look for her, something that'll read really nicely on camera.
One of my personal favorite wardrobes, and if I had enough money I would buy in a heartbeat, is Greta Lee's character Stella. She just is so cool. One of the things that I was able to learn from speaking with the designers was that the way that she stands out was purposeful. There was an element of character development in the subtle shifts between season 2 and season 3. In season 2, she's head of news. She's new to the show. She's new to the show we're watching. And you get a sense that she has streetwear. She's very connected to the youth culture. She comes from a tech background. All of that is reflected in the way that she's dressing. She has a little more avant-garde fashion. She wears, sneakers. She's not in the same kind of wardrobe as the on-air talent are. On air and off air. She doesn't dress the way Alex Levy and Bradley Jackson dress off camera on her own. She's still wearing those clothes. She is herself through and through. In season 3, she's been promoted and she's looking at the future. And her wardrobe stays the same in terms of its style, but the textures, the material, the cuts, everything is elevated slightly. She's got a bigger paycheck. She's in these big meetings now. So her wardrobe has reflected in this very subtle way that elevation in her role at the company.
One of the things that we thought about when dressing Stella for this season was starting to move her away from some of the more sportif things that she wore in season 2, some of the hoodies. We stopped using, some of the more fleecy bits that she wore in season 2 for that, and started moving her into a little more high-end fabrication for that. So, rather than seeing the fleecier things that she wore in season 2, it's maybe the Loewe version of that you'll see in season 3, the head to toe kind of high-end version of that. You'll see her stepping up to use using a bit more of, the woolen version of that. And this is how she's moving into her senior position.
Even though Stella has reached a new level in her career, as we said, her wardrobe has really stylistically remained the same. And that, again, not only speaks to what we've just, mentioned, but also to her self-assuredness. Stella is a very powerful character in herself. Even in her vulnerable moments, she doesn't question her identity, her integrity, her personalness that is reflected in her clothes. And that's really key when you see her in these big, powerful meetings. She's still in these outfits. She is addressing the on-air talent who are wearing heels. They have to show up in these outfits, and she's in her Prada sneakers. And that's okay because she has earned that place, and she knows she's earned that place.
She is, she's still very playful in what she wears. She's still very intellectual in what she wears, but it speaks a little more to her willingness to engage with that senior position that she's in. It's very interesting. Her ability to dress outside of the box as compared to other characters very much says that she is in this leadership position. She is able to walk through that door and say, I am here to wear what I want. And that definitely is part of the way that the other characters see her as a leader. It's the ability to say, I'm gonna roll into this office in sneaks, and I can do that because I am up here. The rest of you will need to come in your heels, in your theory suit, but I'm gonna come in here, sporting my designer wear, and that is because I am in that top office.
John Hamm joins the cast in season 3 as Paul Marks, who's this tech billionaire who's looking to buy UBA. When you think about a character like that, the initial touchstones that we think of are people like Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. There's a certain kind of aesthetic and almost personality type that we're accustomed to seeing when we think of these characters. And Beth really went in another direction for Paul Marks as a character because of what the character himself demanded. And I think that's really key because as an audience, we can still tap into what he represents. We don't have to use the costume shorthands that we're accustomed to. You can build a new wardrobe and still keep that sense of characterization because all of those elements are working together to create a harmonious picture.
Yeah, so this is, I'm glad you asked this one. This was interesting for us because, as you mentioned, we did sort of start out taking a look at those kind of iconic tech bros. We took a look at Steve Jobs, we took a look at Zuckerberg, we took a look at Elon Musk, we took a look at, Jack Dorsey, and we sort of decided that that's not quite it, having, all these discussions with
Mimi.
Charlotte and Mimi in the beginning and their thoughts on where this character originated from. And, this idea that he came from a humble beginning, but that his real connection and connectivity to technology was his love for nature, that he's this kind of free solo hiker, which is referenced, I hope, that I can say this in the first episode, this idea that he goes climbing, that he's out there, that he's traveling, that his way, that his modality of interfacing with the world and his mode of getting to technology is his desire to connect through nature. So what we really wound up doing was taking a lot of looks at companies like Patagonia. We wound up using a lot of companies like Ether, taking a look at these guys who are out there mountaineering and climbing, but what's the highest end version of this? What is a guy with unlimited money, but who truly has a love for the outdoors gonna be wearing? He's not gonna be the suit and tie guy. He's not gonna be a version of Corey. He's not going to be wearing that tie. He is going to be wearing something that he feels comfortable going out in that 4x4, at the end of his day, so that he can reconnect with what it all means for him. And that's how you see him. That's how you see him operating. Like that is his thing. So you see that in his clothes. He's got a little rumple to him, like he's got that ability to take off and go at any moment. He's not crisp. So that's really how we approached it.
In quite stark juxtaposition to Paul Marks is Billy Crudup's Corey Ellison, who always wears a tie. You never see him. I mean, maybe he'll take the tie off, but he's always in these suits. He's always really polished. And he's the one character whose wardrobe, even though it does subtly shift between seasons 1 and 2, it really is very, very unvaried. And that speaks a lot to the character, because even though he presents as kind of zany, a little out of the box, a little pushy and arrogant, his wardrobe doesn't reflect that. His wardrobe is there to be something he doesn't have to think about. It is for ease. It is for, whatever is going to make a big impact that he doesn't have to think about.
When he was head of news, he was like Stella. He was more like rolling in his own vibe. And then when he got made head of the network, that's when he moved into corporate Corey uniform mode. But it was all about not being... The dude does not want to think about what he's wearing in the morning. He's going to go in his closet, he's going to take his suit, he's going to match it up with a shirt and tie, and then he's done. And he's always working. So even when he's in his hotel room, it's still, he'll take the tie off and he'll take his shoes off, and then that's it.
I couldn't let Beth and Sophie go without asking them about Stephen Fry, who makes his debut in season 3 as Leonard. He's on the board, and he has a really, really cool sense of style, which they were very excited to do. I think in part because it was so different to all the other board members, and similarly to Greta Lee's character, it's very different to what you would expect of someone in that role.
We love him.
I mean, I'm obsessed with him, and when they brought him on the show, I was like, oh my God, Stephen Fry is coming, and I would be in the fittings, and I'd be like, I couldn't even talk to him, but like Beth, I'd be like, oh my God, it's like his scarf.
We love him so much.
But Stephen's character of Leonard, he's a board member, so he's a more idiosyncratic character. He doesn't have the kind of influence and power that Sybil does at the top of the chain. So again, it was an opportunity to, create a character that was outside of the box, because that's what we like to do. That's what we try and do across the board, is take an archetype, throw it out the window, and come back with a very nuanced idea around it. And it was, the backstory behind his character was that maybe he had come from a theater background. Maybe he had started in a different version of entertainment, but was very successful, had family money, had some kind of a trust fund, like a very, very well educated. And so all of those things and again, palette, how to introduce palette and color that work with everything else, but to make him stand out from the other suits on the board. So it was less about a counterpart to Sybil, I would say, and more about making him pulling back from the board in general and allowing him to breathe within that, and making him idiosyncratic enough that you buy into the fact that he can be involved in this way.
Obviously, we love costume design. And it was very interesting to look at a show where costume design has this extra layer of meta design, because the characters themselves are news anchors, they are presenters, and their wardrobe is being curated within the fictitious confine of the show. So not only do you have a character that Beth and Sophie are designing for, that character has a character of the presenter. So you have all of these layers that the wardrobe has to take into consideration, but it also has to feel harmonious for us as a viewer. For those of you who grew up watching morning shows, in America, it's a very unique culture. And I remember, New York 1 being on at 7 in the morning when I was eating cereal before going to school. And those people are in your living room. It really does feel that way. As a costume designer, you're thinking about all of those layers of what it means for us as an audience who are literally watching this TV show, but also the fictitious audience that is watching this fictitious show. So when you start to delve into those layers, you get a sense of how integral and detail-oriented costuming has to be. show is really an ensemble show at this point, and there are so many characters with wonderful wardrobes that we didn't have a chance to talk about. But if you have any favorite characters, favorite outfits, please let us know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.